Technical talk on the air. Nobody cares. Moving on.
Moving on.
Of course, this is hour 2 of Spooky Southcoast, where we talk about the paranormal each and every Saturday night. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa, science advisor Matt Moniz, and Stephanie Burke. We all have Twitter accounts now. You can follow us all on Twitter. Of course, the show can be found at SpookySC. You can find me at Tim Weisberg, Stephanie at SBurke910.
Yes.
Matt Moniz at Matt Moniz SSC, and we're working on getting. He should be tweeting by the end of the week. We'll get him tweeting.
Still got technical difficulties with the phone,
but we'll have you all up and ready to go. We'll get you doing it because you can do it on the computer. It's even easier to do it on the computer, and of course Matt Costa at Smoking Monkeys, MONKEEZ, so he doesn't get sued by either the band or the animals.
Exactly.
And
the animals have good lawyers.
They do. Yeah, well, the monkeys are represented by Clarence Darrow, so you can't lose against him. I mean, geez, he sued God and won. Speaking of lawsuits, I'm sure that's one of the many topics that we will discuss now as we go into our paranormal year in review. It's all the paranormal stories of 2014 that caused a stir, and if we forget any, I'm sure that the crew here can remind me if there's any that aren't on my master list here. And also, you can call in. You can call in to discuss your thoughts on some of these stories. You can call in to let us know some stories we may have missed. The numbers are 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. They are both listed right on SpookySouthcoast.com. And if you're watching on Spooky TV at SpookySouthcoast.com or via the Ustream app, you will see the numbers down on the bottom of the screen. I don't know if I'm pointing correctly, but we'll have the numbers at the bottom of the screen for you to call in and share your thoughts. You can also tweet us as well using the hashtag SpookyLive, which anytime the show is on the air, you want to join in the conversation on Spooky TV, just use the hashtag SpookyLive on Twitter. Matt, I didn't tell you. Tell you about the meeting that I had. Well, part of the meeting that I had with the powers that be here at WBSM, the new 1420 WBSM.
Really? What's this?
I talked to them about we have to get Flash-based chat available again on these computers.
We should.
Because I don't know if you've noticed.
People were clamoring for
the Zat chat.
Yeah.
They loved it. And the conversation is down since we made the switch to the Twitter. We're not getting as many people participating on Twitter using the hashtag SpookyLive.
We'll have to start twitting. I'm
very sad. I'm very upset by the fact that there are so many people that follow the show and us personally on Twitter, and they're not involved in the Saturday night discussion. And we did ask last week for people to tweet us or email us and let us know where they're from and how they listen and how long they've been listening and all that, and I got one response. So thank you to the person that sent that one response. But the rest of you, let us know. Because we're about to enter our 10th year. We'll be celebrating our 9th anniversary next year. Literally next year, but actually next month at the end of January. And as we enter our 10th year, we have some new and different ideas for how we want to take the show. And I think we can kind of let the cat out of the bag a little bit now. And, should we wait till next week? What do you want to do? Should we let the people know now what our plan is, or should we make them hang on another week?
You can give a teaser at least.
Because we're not going to put this plan into effect until after our anniversary.
Okay.
So it's not until February, really, where the new plan will kick in. But I've heard a lot of people say over the years, especially over this year, because we've added Stephanie to the program, a lot of people say that, maybe I don't always give people the opportunity to talk, and maybe I'm dominating the discussion a bit too much. But that's not the case. The microphones here are always open.
Yes, they are.
Anybody can say anything anytime they want. But maybe it's just the way that I lead discussions. Maybe I just kind of make people feel like they can't jump in.
So the big announcement is we're firing Tim Weisberg.
That is it. So in 2015, I will just sit here and press buttons. I will only be the producer, and I will no longer be talent on the program. So
just kidding.
But what we really are planning is, there needs to be more of a voice of everybody involved in the show, because you might not always hear it over the broadcast, but these guys are all a big part of what we do. And there's constant discussion going on all week long about different topics and different ideas and different concepts. And there's things that, if I look things up or hear about a guest, I will go to Moniz and ask him what he knows, or I will throw it off Matt Costa and say, what do you think about this? And Stephanie and I are always talking about different things that we should be discussing that we're not discussing, because she's able to kind of bring in a fresh perspective of things. And one thing that we never wanted to do was we never wanted to become stagnant. And I felt like around this time last year, we had become stagnant. And I felt like we needed a kick in the pants. And we got through the first couple of months of 2014, and I was already thinking in my mind, like, we should involve Stephanie. She does a great job on Spirit Connections, and she only lives down the street, and it's probably better to get her more involved in this end where you can talk about a variety of different topics, where, you know, you can really play to all of your strengths. And I was already coming up with the idea of maybe bringing you involved, and then I had you fill in for me one week.
Right.
And you did such a great job. I said, okay, now we can just make it official.
I wouldn't say great job, but
you did a great
Costa
job.
And I survived.
And so that, I think, kind of reinvigorated things.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I want to do to avoid becoming stagnant is I want to keep constantly evolving in what it is that we do. And too much of the time, we come in here and we don't have a guest planned, or a guest falls through because it's Saturday night. Guests can fall through all the time on a Saturday night. It's easy for some of these other programs to have guests on a Wednesday at 6 p.m.
You mean that people have lives on Saturday nights?
Some people do.
Wow.
I know it's weird. We thought doing this program that we were, you know, Saturday nights would be a great time to talk to people interested in the paranormal. We forgot that most of the people that are interested in the paranormal are out experiencing the paranormal on Saturday nights. But one of the things we wanted to do was have more consistency in booking and having more guests on the program, because nobody wants to hear us talk all the time. I think it's okay once in a while, but nobody really wants to hear us talking for 2 hours. Maybe I'm wrong, and you can let us know if I'm wrong, but I don't want to hear us talk.
I think those people are called masochists.
Yeah, maybe. And what's even worse is they put us on with noise-canceling headphones, so we're all they can hear. But I think that, you know, this show is at its best when we're just exploring different topics as the avatar for the audience. Mm-hmm. I always say that that's what we are. We're just the monkeys that push the buttons, and we're really just the conduit for the audience to hear what the guests have to say. So in that regard, I always want to involve other people in the show. I always want to have guests come on the program, and I don't like it when we come in here and we don't have a guest, because we fumble through things and we stretch, and it just doesn't pop as much as when we have an actual topic to discuss. So with that in mind, I came up with the idea, in wanting to always have a guest and wanting to have more of the rest of the spooky crew having a voice in the program, that starting in February, once we enter our 10th year, we're going to have weeks. We're going to have Stephanie week. We're going to have Moniz week. We're going to have Silent Assassin week. We'll have Tim week. And each month, we'll each have a week. And if there happens to be an extra week that month, we'll figure it out. But each person is going to book a guest for that week. And it'll be a topic that they want to explore, that they want to discuss, a guest that they want to speak to. And by doing that, and also they're going to lead the discussion, just as Moniz led the discussion tonight with John Burroughs, that being more because of his encyclopedic knowledge of the Bentwaters case more than anything else. But, you know, as we go forward with this booking plan, this person, whoever's week it may be, they're going to take the lead. And they're going to take the reins. And don't worry, guys, I'll still do the ins and out of commercials and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of the interview itself, I'm going to leave it up to you guys. And we've talked off the air about, you know, making sure that that person who books the guest is going to make sure that the rest of us are as fully prepared as we can be. Because too often right now, you know, sometimes in the hustle and bustle of what goes on, we'll book a guest at 4 o'clock Saturday afternoon. And then you guys come in, you don't know who's going to be on the show. And you don't really have any way to prepare. And you're scrambling to try to look things up and come up with questions during the course of the show. And I do like that spontaneity of having a conversation rather than an interview. But at the same time, you want to be armed with some knowledge going into it.
Yeah, some sort of structure.
So by doing this way, I think it'll make the program a lot more lively. It'll give us the opportunity to bring on a lot of different guests that you haven't heard in the past, either here on this show or maybe even on any show. And you're going to make us talk about things that we might not want to talk about, but that the audience wants to hear about. Things that I wouldn't even think about. Stephanie, you know people that are involved in things that I don't even pay a second mind to.
Right.
But it doesn't mean it wouldn't be a fascinating discussion for the audience and that I wouldn't learn something in the process.
It's very true.
Moniz, you have tons of guests that possibilities for guests that when you tell me about them, I think to myself, I don't know anything about that. But I will know about it when you bring them on and you educate me as well as the audience. Matt Costa, I don't know what the hell goes on in your mind. But if you, I'm assuming that your first guest will be, like a Playboy Playmate.
Hopefully.
Your second guest will be probably like a talking gorilla.
Oh, get out of my head.
No, but seriously, you've always done a great job of coming up with, and I say that in jest because Matt has always done a great job of coming up with guests and coming at me with, hey, did you hear about this guy? And he always seems to find the things that, when we say that we're breaking stories here that other radio shows don't talk about, a lot of the times Matt's the one finding some of that stuff. So we should have a pretty good plan of how to do this. That's why we're not instituting it until we start the 10th year, because it gives us a month to work out all the tweaks.
I totally think that we should call Matt Costa's week Breaking the Silence.
He stopped being silent a long time ago. But now he's magic.
I don't
know if you know that, but now he's magic.
Oh, wait, I did hear that. But you can't call him a silent assassin anymore if you're going to give him a whole entire, show to himself.
Well, but even then, when I say somebody's going to lead the discussion, it's not like the rest of us are going to sit here.
I know.
And not
I'm
say
just
anything.
teasing because he is a silent assassin.
But I think this plan will work, and hopefully, when people are reaching out to us to become guests, they'll learn like, okay, I think like I could really work well with Stephanie on this, and she gets what I'm all about, so I'm going to contact her. And of course, Spooky Crew at SpookySouthcoast.com is always a way to get a hold of all of us at the same time. But we'll develop some relationships with these guests and kind of be able to get a little bit more in depth, because I don't have the time every week to, I've never done pre-interviews because I just don't have the time, and I don't like to.
And if anybody even knew what your real life was like, then they would completely question how you even do the morning show, never mind this show. But
you, Stephanie, you might want to do a pre-interview with a guest.
Right.
You might want to talk to them for an hour or two beforehand to get a feel for who they are and the subjects that you can talk about. It's all in our own different styles, and I think that will start to come through a little bit more in 2015. So looking forward to that, looking forward to taking all of you on that ride with us. Of course, any questions, comments, complaints, anything that you want to let us know, you can always do that. Spooky Crew at SpookySouthcoast.com. Even if you just want to email us and bitch about the show, we're fine with that.
We can say that on air.
We're part of that meeting I had. We can have a little bit more edge.
Oh, okay.
A little bit more.
All right, you'll have to clue me in afterwards.
I'll keep my finger here on the dump button just in
Okay,
case.
good.
But I think we can have a little bit more edge. And we're kind of having some of the restraints pulled off of us a bit too.
That's good.
Because in talk radio, you can only go so far as management will allow you to go. And so we're going to be allowed to go a little bit further now that we are the new 1420 WBSM. We're trying to be a little bit more, we're not going to be so reserved in our questioning anymore.
A little edgy.
We get to carry that over into Spooky South Coast.
Cool.
So we'll always still be respectful. That will never change. But at least now, we've always said we want to ask the questions that the audience wants to know the answer to. And now I think that we can really do that. And so again, 2015, looking forward to it. It'll be our 10th year. Oh my God, never thought we would have made it this far. Really, in all honesty, I thought you guys probably would have gotten lives in this time and been like, I'm too busy on Saturday nights now to go do a stupid radio show.
We're all into paranormal. Hello?
I know. Think about how many missed opportunities we've had to go to different things on Saturday, how many concerts we've missed and parties that we've missed on Saturday nights and all that stuff. And we do it all for you, the Spooky South Coast audience. I think we have a call on the line, so let's take that. Good evening. You're on WBSM Spooky South Coast. How are you?
Well, how are you doing tonight?
Doing well.
Okay, long-time listener.
Thank you.
I like to support the program anyway. I do enjoy it. Look forward to it on Saturday. I was just wondering what your thoughts are on the when I mentioned the Dark Side of the Moon.
Great album.
Yeah. Other than that, as far as what are your thoughts when I mentioned that?
In terms of the physical other side of the moon?
Yes. Did you ever hear anything about anything to the fact of a civilization living on that side of the moon?
Yes.
You did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there are certain lunar bases that are said to exist there.
And there are certainly signs, or there are people who believe that there are signs of that civilization that we see, even the parts of the moon that we can see. People are always looking at it and saying, okay, look at, you can see here's where there might have been some sort of colonization, here's where this might have happened. And we do the same thing with Mars as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was just curious because I've been hearing certain things. It's just a roundabout conversation with certain people, and and it kind of freaked me out one day when I mentioned it to a perfect stranger. I was out at a club one night or something, and I mentioned that, and that person said to me, I heard they're dying off. So I found that kind of strange, you know.
Well, then I'll ask you this. Then how do you feel about the stories that are out there that the moon landing actually happened in the television studio and that we've never actually landed on the moon?
I agree 100%.
Really?
Yep.
So you think that there's never been any mission that has successfully landed on the moon?
As far as what Hollywood depicted, yes. But as far as I think that was pretty much small time, where the actual missions were a lot more advanced than that particular mission would be. So, yeah, I agree with that.
See, I thought that they don't have to be mutually exclusive. We could have landed on the moon, but they could have also faked the moon landing itself on a soundstage, because it's a lot easier to control what you're broadcasting from a soundstage than it is from the base of the moon.
Right.
But the astronauts involved have all said that that's not the case at all. It's 100% legitimate. So, let's take them at their word, I guess.
I guess. Okay, very good. Have a good evening, and I'll be checking in again.
Thank you, and Happy New Year.
All right, you too.
What's interesting about what he brought up is there was something that somebody else told me years ago about, the moon landing and the faked, supposedly, video, is that the missions did actually occur, but they happened earlier in the year, and the actual launch happened out of West Coast, some island, whatever, and they landed there, and the part of what you see is soundstage, and part of what you see is actual lunar event.
Footage that was recorded and then broadcast.
And in other words, these men really did go there, and what you hear and see is something that was partially staged and partially a blend. Now, nobody can prove that this is true or not, but when you're dealing with,
why would they do that? Is that because they
security.
didn't have footage of the?
No, well, what they would have would be some actual footage that you can show that you collected this rock in here, and we know that we can test this rock and say that it's definitely from the moon, and you're seeing stuff like that is legitimate. But they said, this guy was telling me that they went out and surveyed other things that were out there that supposedly of ancient technologies.
Yeah, what happens if you broadcast live from the moon, you land on the surface of the moon, and then all of a sudden, bam, right in front of you when you land there is a freaking alien? Or, it's not exactly a situation that you can control. And also, one of the things that I was always interested in is they were never really concerned about any kind of sabotage for the moon landing, at least not publicly. I'm sure privately there was a lot of concern about that, but geez, you would have thought if you were ever going to get attacked by the enemy, that would have been the time, because of what was on the line to be the first on the moon. But it's certainly something we can explore. I want to have the bad astronomer come on in 2015. That's one of my guests that I'm booking. So we'll talk with him, hopefully coming up in 2015. But right now, let's take a look back at the year in review. Some of the top paranormal stories of 2014, and what a year it was. There's been a lot of things that have happened in 2014. So we'll talk about some of these top paranormal stories, and we'll get everybody's take here in the studio. Some of them will just be real quick little mentions and we'll move on. Some of them will be some in-depth discussions, and you can join in at 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. They're not going to go in any kind of order. They're not going to go in any chronological order or order of importance. Just kind of wrote some notes down. And I put out on Twitter and Facebook, I asked people for some of their suggestions. So a lot of these come from those suggestions as being the top paranormal stories of 2014. But we'll start with this one. Amy Bruni and Adam Berry leave Ghost Hunters. They decide that, they're done with that lifestyle for right now, and they have other projects that they want to get involved in and other things they want to do. And a lot of people couldn't understand why people would want to walk away from the number one show on Sci-Fi, the number one show in the paranormal genre, and one of the top shows on cable. Why would you suddenly decide that, this isn't for you anymore? And we've had the opportunity to talk to Amy and Adam privately about it, and we know all the factors that went into this, but I think a lot of folks out there don't understand TV isn't the end-all be-all for people that are involved in this field. Not everybody wants to be on a television show.
Amen.
I mean,
I don't think it's the be-all end-all for anybody in reality television, not just the paranormal.
right. And, well, I mean, Stephanie, you've had the opportunity to talk to Amy, and, you know, you've talked to plenty of other people that have been involved in these shows.
Mm-hmm.
For people who are involved in the research, sometimes the show gets in the way.
Yeah, it does. And I think in Amy's case, too, especially, I mean, she has a family.
Mm-hmm.
And she has a daughter, and just going through that myself, I wouldn't want to pick up and travel constantly. You know, 5 out of the 7 days a week, you're in a car, you're on a plane, you're going here, you're going there, then you're staying up late nights, and it's time away that she's missing out on, so I don't blame her for doing what she's done. And
Adam having a lot of projects that he's involved here at home,
mm-hmm.
you know, he couldn't be away from them for that
Right.
amount of time. And at least now with Amy going into Strange Escapes, her new venture, she's able to decide when she wants to bring her daughter with her.
Right.
So if she feels like the situation is right, they can stay together. And if not, she's only gone for a couple of days as opposed to being gone for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's really difficult. I think she made a good decision.
But again, people can't understand why people would make that choice, and it really all comes down to personal preference. I mean, you can get burnt out with that kind of travel and that kind of lifestyle. I mean, I know that Moniz, you've been traveling around for your day job as part of some of the things that you're doing for that, and you can probably see, as much as you're enjoying it, but you can probably see how it'll get old quickly.
It gets old very quickly. Yeah, I mean, living out of a hotel room, you know, for a couple of weeks. You know, the first week, it's kind of okay, but after you do the second week and then you leave and go back out again and you keep going back, it wears on you.
And also, if you are serious about the research and about, you know, getting more in depth into the paranormal, at some point you probably feel like you're plateauing having to do it in front of the cameras, because you have to work within the confines of them filming a television show. And I know the idea is that television is not going to infringe upon the investigation, but at the same time, the investigation is kind of handicapped a little bit by the fact that it's television.
My concern is, how does it actually affect their review? I mean, are they trying to stretch what would be considered credible evidence just for, you know,
or are they trying to review too quickly
and missing
because
stuff
they have a certain amount of time to get it done in,
and missing other valuable things? Yeah, it works both ways. It's a double-edged sword.
And it's amazing to me the reaction that people had to what was going on. I mean, people saying that they were fired, people saying that it was, you know, they're pretending like it was their choice, but in actuality they wanted to get rid of them. You know, none of that is true. Why would you? First of all, you've got the #1 show on Sci-Fi. Everything's going well. There's no reason to change. Obviously, both brought a great amount of knowledge and a great amount of experience to those investigations. But people don't bat an eye if somebody decides to leave a group. If they're like, you know what, I'm kind of burnt out by this whole thing, I want to just take a break. That's cool. We appreciate that. We understand that. But because it's a television show, why would you ever want to walk around like you're actually becoming a millionaire or something by being on one of these reality shows?
Yeah, in reality, you can make more at 9 to 5, 5 days a week than you are on Ghost Hunters.
It's probably costing money, the time that you're spending away from home. And so, you know, that's one of the stories there. And, of course, the other part of that story is having Dustin Parry, Joe Chin, Grant Wilson even coming back and being part of Ghost Hunters. At this point, Ghost Hunters being the granddaddy of the current paranormal reality genre, they have to find ways to stay fresh. They have to find ways to keep things interesting from a storytelling aspect as a television show, but also maybe as investigators. You know, they want to kind of switch things up from time to time. They want to try different things and bring together different dynamics. So it's understandable if they'd want to go back, at least in the short term, go back to some of these folks that they know that they can work well with, and then we'll see where the future goes.
See, I think that was done too little too late. I don't have anything against anybody that's coming back, but all of a sudden you find yourself in a predicament where you just lost 2 cast members and you're trying to fill the void with, oh, let's bring back these people, the favorites, and you should have done that throughout the whole entire series, because it probably would have captured the audience a little bit better.
Well, in fairness, and I don't know the ins and outs of it, but in fairness, maybe it was just that, you know, these folks weren't really interested in coming back. And it became a matter of, hey, we need you. Can you come back? Sure, I'll do it. Just, you know, as a favor to you guys. That's possible, too.
It could have happened,
but there's going to have to be some sort of change going forward that's a more permanent solution.
Right.
Than just, you know, like a greatest hits of investigators.
That's kind of what it was like.
Which one? When's Brian coming back?
Oh.
And moving on, in a similar vein, and this is a story that probably strikes a little bit closer to home for me, but Nick Groff leaving Ghost Adventures.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that people are still speculating about. But again, it's the same type of idea. At some point, you have different ideas, not only of investigating, but also of how television is produced. And especially with those Ghost Adventures guys, they are the ones who are producing the show.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like Ghost Hunters where they're filming it and they're turning it over to somebody else. I mean, these guys are overseeing all aspects of the production of the show.
A one-stop shop type of thing.
And their vision. And by being their vision, their collective vision, sometimes some of that vision might change, which is why Nick goes off and starts Ghost Stalkers, a way to kind of put the paranormal out there in a way that he wants people to see it.
Right, and that's tough too, because you have 3 guys who are doing it themselves, and it's, you know, always them against each other. There's no producer to say, hey, no, we're going to go this way, and you all have to agree. That can be very difficult. You know, all those different personalities, all those different views and everything. So
yeah, with a show like Ghost Hunters, really, ultimately, it's going to fall in the hands of the people producing the television.
Right.
Now, Jason Hawes being the executive producer, he can have a voice in that, and maybe he even has veto power. I don't know. But the fact is that, you know, there is that production side of things. And Ghost Adventures has brought in a lot of production people over the years, but ultimately, you know, it's still... You know, it's Zach and Nick and Aaron's names who are on it, and they're the ones who are making the final call. So going off, I mean, I think that's probably one, and I'm not just saying this because he's my friend and my boss, but that's one of the bravest things that somebody can do in this field is to go off and not only leave a show, but to create something that you think is different. And people are coming at him and saying, you know, you're trying to compete with Ghost Adventures. And I can tell you, being involved in the process, competition was never on his mind.
it's a totally different show.
And he never saw it as being up against it. He always saw it as being, and he even said, I have no interest for this to run up against Ghost Adventures, whether I'm on it or not. It was all about being able to have a different perspective on the paranormal, and I think that happened.
Which is fair, because who knows if he had a fair shot at his own perspective on Ghost Adventures or not, because we don't know what happened between all 3 of them all the time. And who made the executive decision in the end of this is what we're going to do, or this is how we're going to do this, or we're going to show this type of evidence and not that. And that can be, I think, a little bit of a mess at times. And
even from a non-television producing standpoint, what if it's that those 3 people, and those 5, if you want to include Billy and Jay, and I don't know whoever else they bring in, but if you have that group of people, certain things might be happening on investigations because of the chemistry, the dynamic, and the energies of those 3 people. So maybe you want to see what happens when you explore the same subject matter with different people, which is what Ghost Stalkers was. It was, let's involve John Tenney, Chad Lindbergh, 2 guys who have had near-death experiences, who have been that close to the other side, and see how much of a difference that makes. So it's just another way of looking at it.
I liked the concept of Ghost Hunters. I think it was very interesting, and it was probably the most interesting thing that's happened in paranormal in the past 10 years.
Ghost Stalkers, you mean?
Ghost Stalkers.
I just want to make sure you got that right, since it was, since it's essentially a plug for the show that I work on.
Did I say it wrong?
What would
You did, but I know normally I would never correct you on the air.
I had 2 hours of sleep last night, so correct me all you want.
I just want to make sure I get the plug right, that's all.
Ghost Stalkers.
Please say once again that you love Ghost Stalkers.
I love Ghost Stalkers.
Thank you very much.
I actually,
You were up all night?
Yes.
You should have came hung out with me.
Well, you didn't call, so that's your own fault.
I figured you had the little one.
She was watching episodes of Ghost Stalkers.
I was.
No, she wasn't.
Because
She
I
won't
love
watch it in
Ghost
the dark.
Stalkers.
She won't watch it in the dark.
I won't. It's true.
Well, what's interesting about you're talking about the different chemistry now that, say, Ghost Adventures is going to be different because they don't have the same original crew. I'd like to see them go back to places they've been to, see if they get different results, because they have now.
It goes along the same lines of what Tim was saying with Ghost Adventures.
Yeah, you're bringing new dynamics, new chemistry, new approaches, new techniques.
But you should always go back to the same places anyways, because one investigation isn't going to prove anything.
Right.
Yeah, but, you know, for TV looks at it as, they've been there, done that. But
Right.
Ghost Adventures has always done a good job of revisiting some of these cases, especially the places where they've had some of their best evidence, and seeing if that is a follow-up. Speaking of Ghost Stalkers, moving on to this, and this is not in a self-serving way, but talking about this in terms of what it meant to the paranormal community, and that being that the Ghost Stalkers program captured what might be some of the most convincing paranormal evidence ever. the full-bodied apparition that was caught at the Old Taylor Memorial Hospital in Georgia. I mean, this is something that I think that it's starting to pick up steam. I mean, not enough people saw Ghost Stalkers when it aired at first. And now they've been putting it out online. They've had some marathons of it on Destination America, and people are starting to catch on. And there were websites that are calling this the piece of paranormal evidence of 2014. Some of them even, this is the piece of evidence for the decade. It's really a compelling piece of evidence. And I think that it just shows that maybe having different approaches could lead to this type of result.
I agree. I definitely agree. I think everything that Ghost Stalkers, and I'm not saying it because you're my friend, but everything that Ghost Stalkers captured in their very short season kind of blew every other show out of the water. The rocking chair alone was a little too much for me.
But the apparition, I think, is the thing that really has people buzzing. And Moniz, you've seen a lot of these over the years.
Oh, yeah. And what they caught, it got my undivided attention.
Mr. Skeptic over there, what'd you think of that? And don't just butter it up because I'm sitting right across from you.
I'm actually trying to bring it up again and watch it.
Well, I know that
for the viewing audience. If
you go to Road Trippers has a whole thing on it too. Which, by the way, if you're not reading Road Trippers, the work of Greg and Dana Newkirk and all their friends over there, please go read it. It's fantastic. But
it was pretty interesting as far as footage is concerned, because it had some sort of base to it. Wasn't like it was just like a floating mist, or it had some sort of
there was some solidity to it. Yeah.
Right.
So I think that'll be something that people will keep debating, especially as hopefully Destination America keeps rerunning those and it picks up some steam. We still haven't heard anything about season 2, so let's hope that we do. Here's another story that we covered here on the program just a few months ago, and that would be the Villisca axe murder house stabbing. Yeah. That apparently an investigator went into the house and decided to have self-inflicted stab wounds in his chest. And a little bit more came out from the story. We still haven't heard really a lot from it, but a little bit more information came out that apparently he did it at the same time that the murders are believed to have taken place. So it seems like, and he hasn't come forward and said yes or no, but it seems like he was trying to really put himself out there on the line for reenactment purposes to see if it gets kind of a rise out of the spirits, which...
That's a little extreme.
It's okay to kind of go for the reenactment. It's okay to kind of go for, a little bit of recreation of the events. But I think stabbing yourself in the chest is just stupid.
I could see, a similar murder weapon as a trigger object, but to actually inflict yourself with some sort of bodily harm, not worth it.
Yeah, I certainly would never do that. And
maybe we haven't heard anything because he's locked up in a padded room somewhere.
Well, it seems like, though, that each year as we do these stories in review, we're hearing more and more stories about irresponsible investigations. Mm-hmm. And I wonder what that speaks to overall.
Like burning down places.
We've had that. We've had people who have gotten killed on investigations. We've had people who have gotten sick on investigations, put themselves in harm's way too much.
I mean, that stuff happens in everyday life anyways. You're just looking at a smaller group of people, and it's going to happen within that group.
I wonder if we're seeing a lot of that, though, because it is the desire to stand out from the crowd, so you're going to take more risks. Is it the lack of common sense from some of the people that are involved?
It can be all the
Inexperience.
above. Yeah. I mean, everybody in the paranormal, to a degree, I mean, there are some people that don't care, but the majority of people are looking for their 15 minutes.
Moniz, you've been involved in this field for a long time, probably at a point when really the only people that were involved in it, for the most part, were folks who, I don't want to say would be beyond reproach, but at least people who had an intelligent approach to it.
Yeah,
the days of going to the library to research.
Yeah, and when you're talking actually going out in the field, yeah, there were people there because they wanted the answers. They wanted the experience. It wasn't about becoming famous. It was about becoming more informed.
And I think they were too quick sometimes to make the correlation between the idiots in the field and becoming famous. I think some of the idiots that are in it for the right reasons. They're just idiots, and they're going about it the wrong way. So it's not like everybody's in it just to get on TV or just to make themselves a buck, but I think some of them just don't understand what it is that they're doing and the risk that they're taking on behalf of everybody else. You know, it's kind of like...
It's like any other hobby, you know. Golf, give you a good example. You got idiots that get out there.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Well, you've obviously seen me on the golf course then. But I mean, look at something like, you know, it's kind of like some of these paranormal investigators are like, you know, the backroom cage fighting version of the UFC. You know, they're not following the same rules. They're not following the same health procedures. They're giving the rest of the sport a bad name because they're doing it like a bunch of morons.
So eye gouging and fish hooking is okay?
In the paranormal? I'd like to see that. I'd like to see some of these, some of this Brazilian jiu-jitsu applied to investigations. So that is another one of the big stories. Speaking of big stories in which people are stupid, Ryan Buell apparently ripping off a whole bunch of people and then essentially going nuts afterwards.
Didn't somebody else do that from some other show?
Yeah.
Weird.
Sounds familiar.
Wait, who, what?
Somebody previously mentioned within this hour.
Oh, yeah, but that didn't happen within this year.
No, it's just been going on for years.
Yeah, it's just something that's always happened. But yeah, Ryan Buell, of course, he put out a tour, and he started, you know, he'd been out of the game for a while with pancreatic cancer. All of a sudden, he comes back, announces that he's going to be having a tour, and that Chip Coffey is going to be on the tour with him. Then all kinds of shady things are happening with the PayPal involved in paying for the tickets and the venues not being aware of events taking place there. All this stuff happens, and next thing you know, Chip leaves the tour because he doesn't feel comfortable. They bring in Michelle Belanger. She gets involved. She feels like things aren't safe. She leaves. And the next thing you know, you've got people that are approaching Ryan Buell trying to get refunds for this tour that's not going to happen. And he's making up all these stories about, and I'm assuming he's making them up. I have no problem accusing him of doing that when he says PayPal is holding up the refunds. PayPal does not hold up refunds.
Right.
You know, we run a business through PayPal. And
they're the safe way to pay.
There's no way that PayPal is holding up the refunds. If somebody wants a refund from PayPal, you just type in that they get a refund, boom. The only way that doesn't work is if the money isn't in the account.
I was just going to say, you went and you spent the money and you can't put it back in the account.
So this has put a huge tarnish on his already sketchy reputation in the field.
This whole entire story is blown.
And the problem is instead of coming out and being straightforward about it and putting out a mea culpa, he just goes the opposite direction. He starts attacking people online, on Facebook, and it's a huge mess that could have been solved pretty easily if he just said, you know, we made a mistake. We invested this money in putting on the tour. Now the tour is not going to happen. We need some time to recoup it, to pull back some of the investments that we made. You know, there's a way that you can handle it without coming out and attacking people, but I don't know. But apparently he's feeling healthier, so at least there's that.
Well, that's a positive.
Yes.
I wouldn't wish bad on anybody.
Speaking of, we talked about the Ghost Adventures guys. Earlier, Zach Bagans buying the Portal to Hell house in Gary, Indiana. And this is the house where, you know, tons of people have been possessed and they've had all kinds of exorcisms take place. He buys the house for something like $30,000. He's going to make a documentary about it and then decides not to make the documentary anymore because some of the crew members that were going to be working on that were starting to have bad experiences and coming down with illnesses, and he felt like it wasn't a good idea to go forward. Now, we always see that some of these supposedly haunted locations go on sale. We always say, oh, if I had money, I would buy that. But it seems like now, more than ever, it's not really such a good idea. Because what are you going to do with it?
I was just going to say, he bought a house. $30,000 isn't much. But
not to Zach Bagans, no.
Right.
He spends that on gas for his Lamborghini.
I'm sure. But what are you going to do with it? It's just going to sit there.
Right. And if you're going to make the documentary, that's one thing. But it's not like it's a Lizzie Borden house where you can turn it into a bed and breakfast. It's not like it's a Houghton mansion where you can bring people on tours because there's so many rooms. It's a little tiny house in Gary, Indiana, which is not exactly a tourist destination.
It's like what, a single floor cape type of thing?
Yeah. And so
it's very small.
I mean, really, you have it just for the sake of having it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he planned on opening up to research later on. I don't know what his plans were beyond the documentary, but
can we be serious? Who cares to watch that documentary?
I would be interested in seeing.
Really?
If it was done right, yeah.
But would it be done right? And what would it
Zach
be
is a
of?
very entertaining filmmaker. I will
Okay.
say that. I will, and it might not be the approach that works for everybody, but it certainly does a very good job of keeping you interested and keeping you entertained. Now, some people might feel that he's over the top in some of the ways that he investigates as an investigator, but in terms of the eye that he has and the drama and the suspense that he can create, I think he would do a perfectly good job of putting out a documentary about it. I just don't know what that would all mean.
Right. Like when you say documentary, I think of, the boring hour-long film of, learning something. What are you going to learn from Zach?
Oh, you're not watching the right documentary, son. Good documentary shouldn't be boring.
Well, I know, but you're learning something. You're gaining knowledge from a documentary.
And I think that we could kind of see a case study in a house that might be 4 walls of evil. But I don't know.
I see what she's saying here. Having Zach being the narrator versus getting, like a David Attenborough or something.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get into all that. I don't want to bash Zach too much in that regard.
I'm not bashing. I'm just saying he's very entertaining on his own show. But to throw him into a documentary of just him in that
that's
house
how he got
over and
started,
over. I know, but
I think
most people don't care about that. When you're a 13-year-old girl watching Ghost Adventures, you don't care about what he did before.
I think I'd like to see at least the story told. And if he's not going to tell it, at least have somebody else come in and tell it, because I think people want to hear more about it. Some of the other stories that have come out, and we're going to try and get through as many of these as we can, but we have a few here that are not... I'm just reading through some of this stuff real quickly. Let's make sure that we get them all in there, at least the key ones. We had a couple of key sightings, and we'll lump these all together over the course of the year. Some footage that came out. One being the Elacoya Country Store in Guilford, New Hampshire, capturing that footage of the glass tray flying across the store. That happening on surveillance footage. Then we had the New Mexico Police Department there that caught an apparition on camera, a supposed apparition on camera. Then we have the Houston UFO sighting, which, if you remember talking about that was the one where somebody was driving in the car and they held the camera along as they were seeing it. So we've gotten 3 pieces of evidence that caught a lot of attention this year, but nothing really that is... none of those really had legs.
Right.
It was kind of like one of those quick stories that had happened and then people moved on from it.
Several Bigfoot films that people took, a number of different things, but you're right, they're all small.
And it seems like nothing is really stuck. Like there's not going to be... it's not like it's convinced anybody.
I don't think it ever will.
No.
Somebody somewhere will always say it was faked, it happened this way. It all goes back to what are your beliefs.
Right. If it's too close and too detailed, it's got to be fake. If it's, in the distance, there's not enough information, you can't.
Most people believe that seeing is believing, and they have to be there to witness it themselves. And some people that are even standing there witnessing something can still say, no, that didn't happen. So you're never going to get anywhere with that. And that's why we'll all sit around and continue to research.
Yep.
It bothers me, though, that too often the news media throws these stories out there like, hey, everybody, a country store in New Hampshire says they caught a ghost. And we'll show you the footage tonight at 11. But there's never any follow-up.
Right.
There's never any investigation done on the part of the news reporter or any follow-up with any groups that may investigate. Now, that country store, when it happened, I put in a phone call. I never heard back from the owner. Well, I did hear back from the owner, but then I returned his call and I never heard back again. So I don't know if they just decided not to go forward with any more publicity for it. I don't know if somebody came in and was able to debunk what happened. I don't know if they just decided they want to get away from it and away from the spotlight. I don't know what happened there. But more often than not, that's what happens is they put out this footage and everybody descends upon those places. All the paranormal groups suddenly want to be the ones to get in there.
Right.
And it spooks off the people that caught this evidence that really weren't looking for it.
Maybe it was bad for business.
That's quite possible.
Because as much as you think that would draw business, you're going to draw it from a different crowd, where your regular crowd might say, oh, I don't want to go in there anymore. Or they're crazy. They believe in ghosts.
In the time that we have left, we only have about 5 minutes. I will hot shot some of these real quickly. FLIR giving us a thermal imaging attachment for the iPhone. Great idea. Only costs $300. It's a lot cheaper than going out and buying a thermal imaging camera from FLIR. On the downside, they only made it for the iPhone 5, and they released it like just a couple of months before the iPhone 6 came out.
And
Very
it's
true.
very limited in range.
Part of that is you're probably dealing with the limitations of the cell phone itself too. But I've noticed now, just as an aside, that Kodak is now getting involved in producing lenses for cell phones. And so I think that as that technology furthers, that maybe we can kind of further some of both the night vision and thermal capabilities of them as well. Because, people will not go out and buy a new digital camera anymore because the cell phone cameras are always way ahead of what you can buy in the store.
It's true. I mean, think about where were cell phones 10 years ago. Can you imagine where they're going to be in another 10 years?
Yeah. I mean, the last camera that I bought in the store was 14 megapixels. My cell phone camera is 16.
Oh, really?
So I'm going to stick with my cell phone camera. It's and it has just as much functionality, if not more. A couple other real stories real quick. Rick Dyer. Guy's got to come in the news at some point. Stephanie, if you're not familiar, he is the Bigfoot hoaxer from a few years ago, the Bigfoot in the freezer. Rick Dyer was the quote-unquote genius behind that hoax. And he's also come back in a few times with other ones as well.
Texas.
The beginning of this year, he claimed that he shot one in Texas last year, and he was going to take it on tour. The tour ended up getting canceled. He comes clean and says that the whole idea of shooting the Bigfoot in Texas was a hoax, but that from now on, he's only going to speak the truth, and that he's not going to cause any more hoaxes. And then what happens? A few days before Christmas, he comes out trying to perpetrate another hoax where now they have a Bigfoot body tied to a tree. Upside down, by the way. So...
Because the only way to catch a Bigfoot is upside down, right?
Absolutely. So at this point, can we just pretty much say that whenever it comes from Rick Dyer, we're just not going to pay any attention anymore?
Just like the boy who cried wolf?
Well, in this case, the boy who cried Bigfoot every single year. But Lauren Coleman, for example, he's already turned his back. He's not going to give this guy any more ink, any more publicity. I feel like that's probably what the rest of the Bigfoot community should do, and a lot of them have. I mean, a lot of them have said, he's just that embarrassing uncle that nobody wants to talk about.
They put him in the same camp as Tom Biscardi.
Although, you could say to some degree that Tom Biscardi has still helped to further research by people trying to prove him wrong. But at least he's furthered the research. Rick Dyer is just a hoaxer out to try to make a buck. And people still keep giving him that buck. Stop it. And making a buck, of course. We had the discussion in the summertime about Prettiest Paranormal, the former Playboy Playmates that came out and were going to start their own paranormal group. Anybody heard anything from them recently? Yeah, me either. And I've been following them all on Twitter, and I haven't seen much about that at all.
Not a thing. Guess they couldn't raise enough money.
So, yeah, pretty interesting. And any other just topics? I have a few other ones that we're not going to get to, but anything else that's popping out in your minds is like a big standout story of 2014.
I think you covered the major ones.
Yeah.
Well, except for Stephanie Burke joining Spooky Southcoast on a permanent basis.
That was the best one.
Yeah, that was like headline news, though. Nobody missed out on that. Matt, any stories that you can think of?
Not that I can think of.
I mean, some of the other ones were, like Ralph Sarchi's story finally making it to the screen and Deliver Us from Evil. The mother who was found not guilty by reason of insanity on Nantucket for killing her daughter in an exorcism attempt in 2011. These are some of the things that we didn't get to cover. Josh Mantello, Berkshire Paranormal Group, no longer being the house team of the Houghton Mansion. And just kind of what does that mean? Because they were one of the original house teams of a haunted location. So some other topics we didn't get to, but certainly if you have any that you would like to discuss with us, you can email us about them, spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com. You can also tweet them to us at SpookySC. We have about a minute left. Stephanie, I know that you've already booked the guest for next week, right?
I have. Next week we have my very good friend Lynn Marie, who is the owner of Uplifting Connections in Bridgewater. She's a spirit medium and tarot card reader, and she's going to come on and discuss a whole bunch of different topics and possibly take some readings.
Excellent. So it's tarot with her? I don't have to start convincing myself to say tarot?
Actually, you can ask her that. I just say tarot.
Okay. I do too.
Actually, you know what? Matt Costa might know how she says it.
Matt, how does she say it?
I think it's tarot.
Really?
Tarot.
I don't know. I have no
All
idea.
right. Well,
I
we'll have to
never
ask
really-
her.
I actually heard somebody call it tarot too.
I would say tarot.
Somebody said tarot.
Some people say tarot. Some people say tarot.
Yeah. I'm going to go. I'm going to keep
Potato.
going with what
Potato.
works
I've
for
always
me.
said tarot.
Potato, potato.
Potato might be the first time I've ever heard potato.
Leave it to you.
But that does it for this week's show. So until next week, from Matt Costa, from Matt Moniz, for Stephanie Burke, I'm Tim Weisberg. We want you all to stay spooktacular, and we will talk to you next year.
We are New Bedford. The new 1420 WBSM New Bedford and WBSM.com.